Does God know you? Welcome. I hope you are well. I am neither a preacher nor an entertainer, so please forgive my somewhat bland presentations. I am a Bible investigator, here to present evidence from the Bible that I believe is God's message to all of us. I also believe that God created all things, both seen and unseen, through Jesus Christ. To me, this is obvious because of the logical sequence of everything around us. It's not random. That made me ask myself, does God know us? And if so, how would he know us? I'll explain this using a device most of us know well, computers. I'll take us back to the murder of Abel, when God told Cain that Abel's blood was crying out to him from the ground. That's our first clue, blood. Genesis 9:4. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. But why is that? When I asked AI whether animal blood is nutritious, this was its answer. Animal blood is highly nutritious for humans, often called liquid meat. It is rich in high-quality protein and highly bioavailable heme iron. However, it must be cooked thoroughly. Raw blood carries severe health risks, including dangerous foodborne pathogens, zoonotic infections, and parasites. However, this is not the only reason God told us not to drink blood. Blood is very sacred to God because, as stated in Genesis 4:6, it carries an individual's life information back to God. God knew Abel had died. God knows when birds die. How? DNA. I know that because this scripture in Leviticus 17:11 gives us the answer. Anyone from the house of Israel or the foreigners who reside among them who eats any blood, I will turn against that person who eats blood and cut him off from his people. For the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have appointed it to you to make atonement on the altar for your lives, since it is the lifeblood that makes atonement. Therefore, I say to the Israelites, none of you and no foreigner who resides among you may eat blood. This gives us very important information about how DNA and God's life-giving spirit are connected. Blood holds much more sacred and important purpose, as we shall see later. DNA is why we don't mix our blood with the blood of any other blood-bearing animal. In God's eyes, when we eat or drink blood of any kind, we pollute his natural design. Do we all have different DNA? Yes, every single person has completely unique DNA. While the genomes of any two humans are roughly 99.9% identical, the human genome is composed of roughly 3 billion base pairs. That 0.1% difference still amounts to millions of unique variations, making your genetic code uniquely your own. Looking at this through an evolutionary lens, it would seem that everyone's DNA should be the same because the strongest members of the species survive by copying previous examples of that species. Once again, proving to me that I am not the product of random chance. Our DNA is the code, much like the system bus that carries information throughout the computer system that returns to God, informing him of whom that blood belonged to and who they were as individuals. Information is carried throughout a computer system via the system bus, which acts as an internal transportation system or data highway. The system bus consists of physical wires or electronic pathways on the motherboard that link the CPU, RAM, and ferrules. If we viewed humans as living computers, what would our components be? A computer motherboard acts as a central nervous system and skeleton. It physically holds all components together and contains the vital pathways that allow your brain, memory, and organs to communicate flawlessly. But God also gave us a conscience. Is there something computers have that is compatible to a conscience? AI gave me 4 ways a computer is compatible to our conscience. I'll show you the 2 that best suit my comparison. Reward modeling, guilt, and empathy. In machine learning, a reinforcement learning from human feedback model evaluate actions and assigns positive or negative rewards to guide future behavior. Your conscience performs this exact function. It evaluates past or potential actions and issues emotional feedback, such as the reward of peace and empathy or the judgment of guilt and anxiety to condition your future choices. Another comparison: adaptive weight adjustment, personal growth. As a computer model continually updates its neural network based on new data, the human conscience is not static. It adapts over time, recalibrating its internal ethical guidelines and threshold for empathy based on your life experiences, cultural influences, and critical reflection. Just as humans invented black boxes that quietly store memories of events in the background, our black box is our conscience, which returns to God upon our death. He then archives our black box in his memory system. The Bible speaks of a resurrection of the dead. First, let's learn the Hebrew term for resurrection. In Hebrew, the concept of resurrection literally means the revival of the dead. The standalone word for revival, resurrection, or meaning to stand or to rise. Then I asked this question of AI. According to the Bible, must one be dead to be resurrected? According to the Bible, the definitive answer is yes. A physical resurrection fundamentally means returning to life after physical death. The dead will be raised imperishable and transformed. Why does the Bible mention a resurrection from the dead when Christianity claims that one enters heaven or hell upon death? Their answer? Judgment Day. Christianity teaches that the final judgment day is a necessary event to physically reunite souls with their resurrected bodies, publicly vindicate God's justice, and usher in the new creation. God is not redundant, and this would be a useless process if, as Christianity claims, people have already been judged and are now living in heaven or hell after death. I'll be going deeper into this false teaching in future discussions. For now, let me continue with the computer analogy. What happens to our computers when we power them off? They shut down, don't they? We could say the computer has died because if no one ever restores power to it, the information stored in it is useless. The life giving force that God lends us is the power that enables our homes, bodies, to function. That means that when John Doe dies or loses power, he is to God like a computer to us that has temporarily lost power. God can read the data stored in a conscience because he is the power that operates everything. Our conscience is not a physical device. It's spiritual, and it is what God has given each of us as his way of identifying us and keeping a record of what has taken place in each of our lives. How can it be proven from Scripture that our DNA is spiritual and connected to us through our conscience at the time of conception? Through the birth of Jesus, who, before being born as a human, lived in heaven as a spirit being. God had to connect Jesus' conscience, rooted in his heavenly existence, to his earthly DNA, which would develop his life-giving blood. Or Jesus wouldn't have known everything he knew about our Father or about his past existence. The conscience holds the memories of our loved ones. Everything of value we have is stored there. And the spirit of who we are is not in the physical realm, but in the spirit realm. We can't hold our emotions in our hands, can we? For his spirit joins with our spirit to affirm that we are God's children. So, for God to revive any individual is simply to restore his spirit to the data contained within our conscience, which also holds our DNA code. Reason dictates that if God can affirm through our spirit who his children are, then he can also affirm who are not his children through their actions or spirit while we are still alive and through our conscience after death. So, the answer to does God know us is yes. He does not dictate to us how to live our lives, but he is certainly aware of what we are doing, as shown in Genesis 6:5. And Jehovah saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of his thoughts, of his heart, was only evil continually. This is what led God to destroy a selfish world once before, and he is close to doing so again soon, based on the evidence of our world's actions today. A small number will survive the coming destruction, as during the flood. Revelation 7:9. After this I looked, and there was a great crowd that no one could number. They were from every nation, tribe, people, and language. They were standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They wore white robes and held palm branches in their hands. Even though it says a great crowd will be saved, that number will be small compared to the world population, as Jesus said in Matthew 7:14, "The gate is narrow, and the road that leads to life is narrow, and only a few find it." Do you want to be counted among the few?